monetizing digital services since 2004, boosting the entertainment industry by making digital content accessible for everyone. AWG, where innovation meets monetization.
LinkedIn presents.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. If you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI Podcast episode, I talk with Yamila H. Harris about exploring the art of the possible. Yamila Harris, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, John. Thanks for having me today.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from the Orlando, Florida area. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And we've been preparing for this episode for a while. It's a pleasure to be able to sit down with you and have a nice conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about and really exploring the art of the possible. As we were preparing for the episode, that was one of the things that you included in some talking points. I thought that is perfect. I just love that framing, and I think it fits really well with your the arc of your career, which we'll be exploring together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Yamila's bio with everybody. Yamila is a dynamic global IT executive, board member, public speaker, and mentor with 30 years of leadership experience across multiple IT and business disciplines, including service delivery, organizational change management, workplace services, and end user experience, contact center technology services, and healthcare innovation. She started her career in healthcare as a pioneer of early web-based EMR and managed healthcare software solutions. She has since spent much of her career leading cross-functional, cross-industry global teams and driving innovation at transformational companies, including Dell, HP, Hewlett Packard, Enterprise, and Atos. I think I'll pause there. I could go on and on because you've done so many cool things, but I'm going to pause there and let you take over. Is there anything you would like to highlight or draw attention to from your background, your personal context at the outset, or we can also just get into that as we go throughout the conversation?
I was going to say, well, that was already kind of a mouthful. I feel like, yep, we're done with our 30 minutes. No, just kidding. So I think that there's, what you hear in the bio, which is a lot of the professional components of it, but outside of kind of the day-to-day, I keep pretty active as well. So for me, kind of the reason why we go into our professional careers is make sure that we are working to live and giving back as well. So I do quite a bit of work with nonprofit organizations. I'm on the board of the Hispanics and Technology Executive Council. And am a real advocate for, women in technology, minority groups that are looking for more visibility as well, and helping to really highlight and promote them and advocate within their career journeys as well. And then literacy in every one of its forms, because, even when you think about technology and you think about software development, it is a form of literacy. It is a language. But reading and understanding language and culture at a very young age, to me, really sets the tone for a lot of what can be success or failure as you look at the rest of your career path. So I started, as a reader at a very young age, had, a mom that while she did not speak English, or, early on, learned English. And as she was learning English, would read us the stories along, with her. And so that love of, reading and language is something that just inherent in myself and my siblings from a really early age. And I'll kind of stop there, and we can go any direction you want to go, John.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that. The color background a little bit, but we're actually going to dig in more, and I'd love to just learn a little bit more about your upbringing and personal life as it's laid a foundation for the many life and career successes that you've had. And like you said, we work to live, we don't live to work, and there are so many important issues and so many important people in our lives, that hopefully we're doing meaningful, fulfilling work that has an impact. But let's also not forget that first and foremost, we're here, for our loved ones, and we're here, to enjoy this world and to enjoy all of it, not just work 24/7, right? So let's start with your upbringing and a little bit about your personal life. So I know, for example, you grew up in South Florida. Things like you're a Star Wars fanatic and sci-fi and all those sorts of things. They may not directly relate to your current IT kind of expertise and background, but you started working at a young age.
I did, yeah.
So you're helping out with the family. Yeah. Tell us more about that and how that shaped you.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think a lot of that early part and that upbringing really translates into my leadership style today. So definitely worth kind of digging into. As you mentioned, I grew up in South Florida. Yes, I'm in Orlando now, but I haven't only been in Florida. I've lived in Texas and other parts, of the world. I've had short-term assignments and done quite a bit of travel, as you can imagine, as an IT executive. But growing up in South Florida, I think that one of the nice things is that was a really big melting pot. So I was exposed to a lot of cultures very early on, grew up in a household that was multilingual. So both of my parents are of Cuban descent, so they're born in Cuba. So I grew up also with that heritage, Hispanic heritage being a real big part of our upbringing. Funny enough, community is a big aspect of the Hispanic culture, and literally we lived on this one street, and on the following street I had both sets of grandparents that were diagonal from each other, and we would come back from school, and there was always that sense of family, that sense of community, and going out and I will admit we used to play our grandmothers against each other to see which one would had the better meals after school, to see which house we went to. But yeah, it was fun. I am the eldest of the girls that was born into the family, and so almost inherently I became kind of that pseudo mother figure. Played a big role in helping to set the tone for not only my siblings, but all of my cousins that were, in the area as well. And we were all pretty close knit. So I had that, added component of really being the person that was setting the example. And I took that, quite to heart, and making sure that I was setting a good example. My father, when I was probably around, 11, 12 years old, kind of stepped out of the picture. My mom, who hadn't known anything other than being a housewife and got married at a very young age, at the age of 15, really was the one that became the resourceful one and stepped up and taking care of, the household and 3 kids. And when she started to have, some health challenges around the age of 14, I really stepped in and started working as well. So I was at a very young age, I think it was like 15 going on 40, right? So helping to take care of the family, helping to take care of my siblings. And that in part kind of set that mindset of the art of the possible, right? Because for me, I never really stopped. I've always been someone that asked a lot of questions, super inquisitive. And, to a certain extent, when it came to authority, not that I had a disregard for authority, but I had no problem in questioning authority as well, right? My parents had always taught me to, make sure that, you're not just blindly following. Make sure that you're asking questions. Make sure that you're paving, a path. And so it was kind of interesting that, I grew up with this mindset of you can do anything that you really set your mind to, but you also have to put the work into it and make sure that you're putting that effort. So I always did ask a lot of questions, and going into the workforce, it's something that translated into that as well. So I got a lot of opportunities. While a lot of the opportunities I got were organic, I also did a lot of the things that nobody else wanted to do, right? I wasn't afraid of saying, yeah, I'll try that. I'll give it a shot. Yeah, I haven't done that before. Or, hey, a new challenge, I'll go ahead and I'll do that. And I think that the era that I was kind of born in and kind of grew up in, where technology was really just coming into focus. I mean, this is before the World Wide Web and before IT was even a thing, right? Because, had you asked me when I was 12, 14 years old, what I wanted to be when I grew up and whether I wanted to be in IT, I didn't even know what IT was. IT didn't really exist.
I wanted to ask about that. So, so the whole, and we're in the middle of it now too, with disruptive technologies. Like there are careers in whole industries that we haven't even probably conceived of yet, right? Exactly. That will exist in another 5 or 10 years. And you may have faced some of that just with IT, and, you may never have imagined as a teenager that you would end up as an IT executive. But did you ever, like at that young age, and you're working and you're helping contribute to the family, you're taking on a lot of responsibility, what did you kind of think of in terms of a career, or was that even on your mind at all at that point?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think, for me, it's always been I've always wanted to do everything, not just one thing. And so when I was young, I think everyone expected me to be a lawyer just because I liked to question things, so regularly. But I was always very...
Monetizing digital services since 2004. Boosting the entertainment industry by making digital content accessible for everyone. AWG. Where innovation meets monetization.
Rational about, the way that I approach things, too. Persistent, rational, but the argumentative side was definitely there as well. But I wanted to be, you name it. I wanted to be a Disney animator. I wanted to be a forensic scientist. I was fascinated with forensic science. I wanted to be a professor, but very specifically, I wanted to be a professor of children's literature. I like to write short stories, kids stories, and I like to illustrate them. And so, when I did become an IT executive, or as my career evolved, it was kind of interesting that I still took aspects of all of those things that I loved, and I found ways to weave those into my day-to-day. So when you think about life as an executive, I definitely have to use those skills that you would use if you were, a lawyer or an attorney. I have to be able to communicate very effectively. have to be able to influence and mediate. When you think about the forensic science aspect, it was really around solving problems, and asking the right questions to get to the right outcomes. And definitely that's something that is a really big part of my day-to-day as well. When you think about, the literature and the art, it's one of the things that's given me an advantage in technology, is I've got the left and the right brain, right? I really bring the creative aspect because I love kind of the asymmetrical things versus the symmetrical things. And that typically is not as congruent when you think about technology, right? And so adding those aspects to it. But I've been able to add that flavor of all of those things that I wanted to be or considered when I was a kid into life in IT or in technology. But yeah, definitely wouldn't have foreseen it at that time, and got into it really organically, believe it or not. So I was working in healthcare, which I mentioned. And, at the time, again, I mentioned, 14 years old, et cetera. So, I started at things like, medical records, filing medical records, and, front desk back when everything was like these paper, logs, and you had to open these like logs and put in the schedule for folks. And the medical records were these paper, folders that would get lost in the medical center. And, you had to it was like, where's Waldo? It's like you had to go out and like find the folder and where it was, and in the medical facility. And I started to ask questions, and it was like, can we do this in a way that is going to be not only more efficient, but where we're actually putting the experience of these patients, and at the time these were older patients in South Florida, a lot of it is Medicare clinics and so forth, and for them it was like an experience, right? They would come to the medical centers, and it was, they needed transportation. They were going to see multiple physicians. They were going to use it as their community time to engage with other people in the community, so that, they had like community center type things as well. And so started to look at, wait a second, this is an experience for them. This isn't just, I'm coming in, I'm going to see a doctor, I'm going back. And what are the things that we're doing that are going to help improve that experience and make it something that is much more efficient? And that's where the technology aspect came in. I had someone that, literally came up to me and said, have you ever considered, coming and working on the technology side of things? And I said, well, I hadn't, but let's give it a shot. And the rest is history.
That's super, super interesting. We all take interesting, unique paths, don't we, in our lives? And I appreciate you providing, that background for yours. And it laid the groundwork for this really fascinating career in this career journey that you've been on. Not necessarily the traditional route, but frankly, most people probably don't take a super traditional route, do they? And I suspect that, women, and particularly women of color, probably are more likely to take non-traditional routes because you're paving a new path, right? You're creating the new traditional kind of route and journey for you. So I think all that's really cool. I know one of the things that you have talked about in the past is going back to school for your MBA a little bit later in life as a non-traditional student. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that and what went into that decision.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And kind of interesting one, because I just want to go back to something else you said, women of color, and it's probably more typical that they're not taking the traditional route. Interestingly enough, I think that when I first started doing some public speaking, literally, I went out and I remember thinking, okay, I just went out and talked to somebody or stood on a stage and said something. And someone came up to me afterwards and said, I came all this way just to see you because I heard that you were going to be coming out here, and there are no other female leaders in this company and female leaders in IT. And it just felt like, wow, I'm looking at you and thinking one day I can do this as well. And, when I talk about kind of my history, it also gives people that space to kind of realize you don't necessarily have to follow one path in order to get to your destination, and the typical trajectory is not, it doesn't typically have like a perfect, slope or slant, right? It's these ups and downs that kind of take you along the way. And there's a lot of times, lateral movements, downtrends, uptrends, etc. But, and I lost my train of thought a little bit. I will be honest, but I think that we were talking about going back to school.
Yeah.
And, I didn't go back to school until, I was already into my 40s. And at that point, it wasn't because I needed to, because it was going to advance my career per se. It was something that was a meaningful achievement for me. I've always believed that it is important to continue your education, and there's many ways to continue your education, right? But for me, it was really, I've gotten to this point where I want to be able to go back, and I want to be able to potentially unlearn some of the things that I've learned, get put into an environment where I'm challenging some of the perspectives and maybe even some of the baggage that's been built over the years, just, from learning and experience one way, right? And so it was great, honestly, to go back to school. It was incredibly meaningful to me personally. And after encouraging everyone else in my family, right? Because I fought for my sister to go into higher education. I helped to pave, that way for her financially, et cetera, right? And with any support that I could, it was great for me to be able to go back and live out what I was, helping my siblings to achieve as well. And my sister is an incredible educator now. And I am so incredibly proud of her.
It also illustrates, again, the non-traditional path. Like you said, you didn't really even need to go get your MBA at that point in your career. You're already a successful executive. It's more for self-fulfillment and development, yeah, right, at that point, which I think is great too. I did more of the traditional educational path myself, in my young late teens and 20s and going through my schooling. But my wife is a little bit different. We both were in college for undergrads around the same time. But then she did her master's degree a little bit later, and then she finished her doctorate just about a year and a half ago, as she was approaching 40. And part of that is just because of life and because of other family context and whatever, but she still has a really bright career ahead of her with that education. And it's just a really, I think it's a cool thing to just empower people to embrace their unique journeys and to take advantage of the opportunities as they arise. So that you can, whatever you did in the past doesn't have to be what you do in the future, and you can reinvent yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this goes back to that whole, art of the possible. And for me, I think it's really easy when you get to a certain point in your career, and if you've had a lot of successes, it's easy to become complacent. And I think it's really critical to kind of take a step back and think to yourself, the moment that you decide that you don't have anything else to learn, and you should just sit down and put your feet up. I think that you lose some of that opportunity that still sits in front of you, because it's really easy for folks to say, I've already done that. I already have, X amount of years of experience. I've already, I've learned that before. I don't need to learn anymore. And I think every time that you go back, even if you do refresher classes, it's incredible because you're getting different perspectives depending on who you're learning from, who you're learning with. And like I said, I think a big part of it is learning when to unlearn.
Yeah.
Certain things really comes into play as well. Because if you've been doing something for 30 years and you haven't taken that opportunity to kind of take a step back and say, well, this is, or you keep on saying, well, this is how I've always done it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. A lot of times it's like, whoa, wait a second. Let me try and take a look at this from another lens or another perspective. I also think that's the beauty of diversity in every one of its forms, right? When you think about diversity of thought, of experience, gender, race, etc.
Yeah.
It's that friction or that dance of multiple perspectives that really pushes you to make change, drive innovation. You don't have innovation if you don't have some challenge in terms of perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has just been a really fun conversation. I know we could go on and on, but I note the time. I need to let you go here in a few minutes. I thought before we wrap up, if you can share with the audience how they can get connected with you, find out a little bit more about your work, and make that personal connection, and then maybe close by just talking a little bit more about how we can help others around us realize and achieve their potential. I know that's a passion of yours. What are some of the things that you're doing in that space, and how can we all help lift those around us to do the same? Yeah,
absolutely. Any of the viewers or listeners are welcome to get, in touch with me. I'm a pretty avid LinkedIn user, so it's probably the easiest way to get in contact with me. And I think, John, you've got that information that you can share out with folks. So I think that's probably the easiest way to reach out to me. And I'm pretty responsive there. I think that, going back to the art of possible, I did want to go back and make sure that we're just underpinning where that comes from, as well as, for me, remember whether you're in a leadership role or you're not in a leadership role, being a leader isn't about a title. It's about what you're doing at the end of the day. The art of the possible is about really realizing that impossible, it's only ever a speck in the giant spectrum of time. It's just a moment in time, and anything that you think is impossible will at some point become possible. It's just a matter of time, effort, etc. And so be on the side of the folks that are driving the change and making things possible. Why not, right? So that would be one bit of encouragement. And again, going back to you don't have to have a title to be a leader. There's this concept that we talk about in HITEC. It's push up and pull up. So every single one of us as individuals can be an advocate, can be a representative, can be, an ear that can listen, even, right? So do what you can to push up and pull up. Look at not only ERGs within your company, so employee resource groups. Find ways to explore opportunities to connect outside, to external, either professional or community networks. But there is an opportunity for everyone. And if I had to say one last thing, and this I learned, and so I know for a fact, because I hear this from people all the time, well, I just don't have the time. At the point when I went back to school for my MBA, not only was I doing the MBA, I was already an IT executive. I was traveling 80% of the time and working with a portfolio of clients that was very demanding. And in the middle of that, I also, switched companies. And so what I will leave you with is, if you really want to do something, you will find a way to make the time. And again, I was working on the board of directors. I was giving back to the community. So if you really want to do something, you will find a way to make it happen. Understand your priorities and find ways to prioritize those.
I love it. Yamila, this has just been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Yamila can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. If you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations podcast, enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page. And please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.